as you to help you, because y'all didn't have y'all weren't even thinking about money at this point, because you had no idea from a business person standpoint. And correct me if I'm wrong on any of this. I'm asking, put a question mark at the end of this. But to me, it sounds like y'all weren't even thinking about, like, because a business person's going to look at it and what they're going to think is, this is how I approach everything is, if I invest $10,000 in this, how long is my money going to be tied up and what's going to be my return? And does it make sense for me to put my $10,000, pull my $10,000 and put it aside for this length of time for this return? That's what a business person's thinking.
Right.
Y'all aren't thinking that. Y'all are thinking about the art.
Yes and no.
Hey, welcome everybody. It's Keep Growing with Kevin Faulkner. Today I've got Jeremy Van Winkle on here with us. I've been wanting to hang out with him for a while. We had a good phone conversation, and one day, and I was like, man, I got to have this dude on my show, man. It's really a great story that he's got. So welcome, Jeremy. I appreciate you being here, man.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, man. So how was the 4th, man?
Man, we had a great time. We did some barbecuing in the backyards. We just moved to Dallas on the 1st of June, up North Dallas. And we had a bunch of neighborhood kids playing on the water slide. Some families came over. Then our house backed right up to Louisville Lake and the Greenbelt there. So they were shooting the fireworks pretty much in our backyard. And we had like 30, 40 people come sit in some lawn chairs, watch the fireworks show. It was a good time, man. We had a great time enjoying those freedoms.
Yeah, and you were talking about before we went live, you were talking about you're new to Texas, man. So what's that? When'd you move? When'd you get here, man? And what's that been like?
So we moved actually May 31st is when we pulled in the driveway here. And we moved from a town of 70,000 people to a metroplex of 7.5 million people. And so the speed of life is a lot faster, the day to day. But the things to do for my family, the people to connect with, I mean, you just think on a population size, it's 100 times bigger. So you would imagine the opportunities here are 100 times bigger in the city. So we're filling it out, finding our place, finding our groove, and we're enjoying it.
Oh, man, well, we're definitely glad to have you here in Texas, brother. It's the only state I've ever lived in, man. So I've traveled and been to a few different places, but Texas, man, I've lived pretty much all over Texas. I haven't lived in far West Texas. I haven't lived there, man, but I've lived in South Texas. I've lived in Central Texas, East Texas, North Texas. So, man, yeah, it's the variety, man, of things here in Texas is pretty cool.
Yeah.
But man, the thing that the reason I wanted to have you on here is I want to talk about like what you've built, man, what you've been doing. So let's tell the listeners a little bit about who you are. First of all, give us just a little short bio, a little rundown on for those that don't know who you are and what you're about, what you've been doing over the last couple of years, man.
Yes, sir. Well, first off, I'm a Christian man and kingdom builder. And I give the glory to God for everything that he's done in my life. But he also allowed me to walk down some pretty dark roads. And I believe he allowed that. I definitely believe in free will. God gave us that. But he also allows things to happen. And for me, that was a drug addiction. And I was a meth and heroin addict. And man, I become a felon because of it. Was stealing power sports, stealing equipment, selling it across state lines. I was facing some big time. God worked a miracle in the court system. I didn't have to serve a long time. But it all come down to Christmas time, 2017. And my wife said she was going to leave and take our son. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks. Early on in life, I had that entrepreneurial spirit. Started when I was 19, different things, different businesses, trucking, real estate, stuff like that. But after that, that season of drug addiction, I was like, this is not who I'm meant to be. And, so I walked into it. If she would have left, it would have taken my why away. Why am I doing this? Early on, I always wanted a family and something to build for and grow, and didn't really understand legacy at that point in my life, but I knew I wanted to build for my family. And so if she would have left, that was my why, and so I was like, I got to get my life together. So I walked into church house January 8th, 2018, and I wrapped up meth and paraphernalia in toilet paper. And I walked in front of a congregation of people, no shame. I knew what I was there to do. I was committed to doing it. And I put it on the altar in front of all those people, and I quit cold turkey. Now I went through 2 or 3 weeks of hell. My wife had to take care of me, from all the withdrawals and all that. But since that day, I haven't looked back. God took that addiction from me. I've never been through rehab, never done any of that. I just made the decision and I quit. And I've been committed to that decision now for 5.5 years. So that led me to last year. I wanted to build something that would protect society from who I used to be. And from that story, I would steal those power sports and equipment. And so I built a facial recognition product. I had the idea. I'm not a tech guy. I'm not an engineer, but I went and took my savings and the money I was making, and I just started pumping all that money into having this product built. And had it built, started testing it, beta testing it on different machines and figuring it out, and just all the steps that you have to do to create a product, right? To make sure it's right and ready to go to market. And I did that. Then I didn't know how to sell it. I thought it was a B2C play, direct to consumer, e-commerce play, but it wasn't. I didn't know what I was doing. I'd been around power sports and equipment all my life, but I'd never been on the business side aspect of it. And so I started pitching investors because I had went broke. I'd spent all my money trying to get this going. And but I believed in the vision. I believed it solved the problem and there was a need for it, but I was out. And so I'd do side jobs and pitch investors and do more side jobs. But I ended up pitching 54 investors before somebody said yes. And they didn't directly say yes. I had like a 10-minute window, and he jumped on a Zoom call. He was like, hey, I'm late for a meeting, but I want to hear what you got. You got a couple minutes before I got to go. About 15 seconds into my pitch, he was smiling. And that made me excited, but then it took 2.5 months before we actually closed the deal and accomplished it. So we raised multiple 6 figures for that. Now we have a team. We have a tech team. We have a manufacturing team. We're building out our sales team through independent reps across the country. And we're going direct to dealer. We're skipping the distribution method so that our dealers can make a greater profit. And man, it's really exciting.
It's very exciting. And the thing that's interesting about this is what the story I always try to tell in this room is that you can do things. I want people to understand this group's called Keep Growing, man. And it's about growth. It's about that letting people know that you can do things. You can do what you want to do. You can go after your dreams. And that's why I have people on that have stories like you. And, I had Tony Klecker on here, and she does, do you know Tony? No, she does salsa, man. And she created this salsa company from her kitchen. And what fascinated me about that discussion, and I want to dive into this with you, is where did she get, where do you so you're just a person, you're just a dude, and you're living your life, and you're like, you know what? I think I want to build this facial recognition company, well, I don't know where to even begin, so what did that look like for you, man? What was the very first thing you did? I'm talking about, basically you overcame your addiction issues, or And you got your life moving in the right direction. Now you're like, okay, I want to do something big. You know, I want to do something bigger. This is what I want to do. What was the very first thing you did when you had nothing, man, and you're starting out with this idea?
So first off, if I can talk about the idea first, to me, it's kind of like a vision board. You know, if you have an achievement or a material thing on your vision board, it's good to be able to look at it, right? You know, my vision board is the lock screen of my phone. So I see it 100 times a day, probably more. But that's one thing, to be able to see it. But the other thing is to have that a feeling associated with it when you achieve it, and to be able to mentally feel that feeling as if you've already achieved it, because then your brain doesn't, or your body doesn't know that you really haven't done it yet. Your brain thinks you're already there. And so that shortens the gap to be able to actually achieve something. And so I've done a lot of studying this past year on that, and I'm trying to build that practice into my everyday life. But when I had this deal, I sat down in a quiet spot, and I was like, I want to figure out a niche inside of a niche that I can build a product for. And so I was already involved in the off-road space, and I was like, okay, well, these other companies are doing things, and what they've done is they gather different pieces of tech or products, and they've rebundled them and packaged them together to serve a new niche, right? And so that's where my mind was at. And then I just started going through things, and then I took out a note, and honestly, man, I believe God gives us these ideas. He just puts it in our brain, and it's up to us to run with it. And that was the first thing I wrote down: facial recognition security. Well, I didn't know what it was for yet. And so I started doing that. Anyway, once I had the concept, the very first thing I did after that was brand. And I believe brand is important. And so I started trying to name it and think of what I wanted this brand to feel like. The power sport industry is very masculine, right? It's masculine, it's strong. I've got to represent that mentality of they really like American made. So I was trying to get all of that built into my brand, in my logo. Represent the company is called Tougher, like TUFR. So that was just the ideology behind building that brand. I want something tough, masculine, off-road, all that built into that logo. And so once I had that accomplished, that took me a week or so to get that really honed in and figured out, okay, this is what.
How did you know that the brand was the first place you needed to go there? Did you read that, or did somebody tell you that?
No, I'd read that before. So, man, I can't remember what book it's from, honestly, right off the top of my head. But that's one thing I've always done, is been a reader.
So you just had a concept and you started building the brand around the concept at this point. Okay.
Yeah. So I had the concept, built the brand, didn't know what it looked like, but I knew what it could do, and I knew what I wanted the brand to look like. And then I started calling engineering firms after that. And bro, I'm just a little guy. I got no money, you know, nobody wanted to hear me talk. Nobody. And I called a bunch of, I don't even know how many, but just getting total no's. It was too small. Like they wanted CAD drawings, and they wanted a description of what it would do and the components, the bill of materials. They wanted all that. I didn't know it. And so I called and called. Finally, I called this place in Louisiana. They had one Google review. and I picked up the phone, called them, and the owner of the firm answered the phone. I was like, look, man, I just told him I'm being told no left and right, but I believe I've got something, and I'd like 10, 15 minutes to share it with you. He was like, yeah, let's do it. So I drove over to his shop, and we sat down, started discussing it. He brought a notepad, started drawing it out, and that's where it started coming to life. And he built the first prototype, and it was a pretty big box with just components built in to show that the idea worked. And now we have a PCB board. It's an inch by 2.5 inches long. So, I mean, it's fully built out. piece of technology that goes into a power sport or piece of equipment, and it disrupts the starter and ignition system. And it verifies you and authenticates the rider or operator through your cell phone through facial recognition to be able to unlock the ignition system and the starter to be able to fire the vehicle.
Is he still involved?
He is. Yes, sir.
You finally found somebody that would, and you don't know what you're doing at this point still, man. You're just going, you're not knowing who to trust because you don't know how any of it works.
Yeah.
You're trying to figure it out. So you got a prototype. You said, how big was this thing at the time?
It was like 10 inches by 12 inches.
So now what do y'all do next?
So then we don't even know, we know the concept of what we're trying to accomplish, but we don't even know all the problems that we're going to face, right? So we get it down to size and we start testing it. Then that's when we start realizing, okay, well, we're going to have too much battery draw. So we got to add a fifth wire that's an accessory wire that when the key turns on, it sends power to awaken the device to be able to broadcast a Bluetooth connection, all of that kind of stuff. We had to get it waterproof. We had to get it heat resistant, all these different things. It was just trial and error. So how do we install it?
You had to find somebody, and I'm just processing this, right? I'm walking through this. You had to find somebody as crazy as you, man. So you had to find an engineer basically that was as crazy as you to help you. Because y'all weren't even thinking about money at this point because you had no idea from a business person standpoint. And correct me if I'm wrong on any of this. I'm asking, put a question mark at the end of this. But to me, it sounds like y'all weren't even thinking about because a business person's going to look at it and what they're going to think is, this is how I approach everything is, if I invest $10,000 in this, how long is my money going to be tied up and what's going to be my return? And does it make sense for me to put my $10,000, pull my $10,000 and put it aside for this length of time for this return? That's what a business person's thinking.
Right.
Y'all aren't thinking that. Y'all are thinking about the art.
Yes and no. Yes and no. So he caught my vision and I told him my story. I was upfront why I'm building this and he could feel my passion, right? And he wanted to join that passion. But I did pay some money up front. At this point, I had $20,000, $30,000 invested into it. And this was just the beginning. This is just the beginning. So, I mean, that bill grew extraordinarily, over six figures by the time, we were done. But so I keep going back to this, but it was a God thing, right? God allowed me to find the right person because I kept knocking. If you don't knock, nobody's going to answer. You don't ask, nobody's going to give it to you. So I just kept going person to person until I found the guy that he could align with my passion. He had the skill set and the team to bring it to life. And we just worked closely together until we got the product. Then once we had a working product, we started trying to figure out how we were going to install it in the machine. Well, the first thing comes up, well, we can't splice wires because now it voids manufacturer warranty. So we had to go back and figure out, okay, is this product even going to work now? Because the whole concept was to put it in the ignition system. Well, we had to find a whole nother location in a vehicle to put it to still make it work. And so that was a whole process. And then once we identified that, then we had to start building dummy harnesses. And we're still doing this today. We have to identify connectors on vehicle specific connectors that go to the starter solenoid. You
know what any of this stuff was, or did you learn all this in this process? You learned everything. You learned what a dummy harness was. You learned all this stuff.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so this is not very sexy to the person that's listening to our show right now. But to me and to entrepreneurs, it's very fascinating because we all know, man, you don't know what the heck you're doing when you're doing this. And it's a beautiful story, man, because you're explaining how you get to success. Because everybody thinks, the people that just watch and they watch what you do, they just think it just happens. But there's all it is, man. The whole definition of entrepreneurship is solves problems, figure shit out.
Yeah.
Shit, man.
over and over and over
Oh.
again. And they don't get easier.
over and over and
Hey, I've got some right now. I'm not even to tougher related. I can't say too much about it, but because of this process and now my connections that have been through this, I've now got equity in another company as a consultant. And it's a large portion of equity for another company that I'm involved in. And we're going through the same process again in a total different technology, a more advanced technology that I don't like. When we're talking about it, I don't even know how to explain it. I say, look, here's the vision. That's what I do. I come in with the vision, and then I had to have a tech guy with me to be able to explain all the tech behind it, because I can't. I'm not a tech guy. I'm just out here hustling, trying to make it work. I have a vision of where I want to go and learning day by day.